first of all, what's the highest status or level of race that you've competed in up until today?
The biggest race that I've competed in is the Ironman World Championships, and that was in 2017 as well.
Was this the one in CONA?
Yeah, that's in CONA. Yeah.
All right. And I've also heard then that one that's a tough race, no doubt. Things in the climate. Tell me what goes through your mind, whether it be in that race, whether it be in a full Ironman, where everyone will have their own little, ebbs and flows, like their peaks, real down times. I've heard a lot where the people go, it's when you don't have the crowd, you don't have spectators, it's just an open road where your brain can swift in all different directions. How do you personally, and also you're a coach, so how do you also try to help prepare your athletes mentally for those moments where you do take the dip, you don't have a crowd, you might be cramping, you start second guessing yourself. How do you personally, and also how do you train your athletes mentally to try step over those dips?
I think again it all comes down to preparation and training. You've got to be willing to take yourself into those dark places in your training, and you've got to learn how to get comfortable with that dark place in your training. You'll never really be comfortable, but if you've never been there before and all of a sudden you get whacked in a race, it's going to be very ugly. So I think a big thing is obviously physical preparation, making sure that you can actually go the distance, because that gives you a sense of confidence, knowing that you've done this before and that you can do it. It's just a matter of getting out of that place, because there is ebb and flows, as you mentioned. Sometimes you feel fantastic and sometimes you feel horrible. So that is probably the biggest and most important thing about an Ironman is knowing when to hold back when you're feeling great, so that you have the discipline. And we hope that our athletes never really get into that kind of dark place in the race, but it does happen. It's inevitable.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Isn't it just one of those things that no matter how much you train, there probably will be some point where even if you a champ, you leading the race, I'm sure the race leaders have their moments of, the down. They just obviously experienced enough to try get themselves out of that hole.
Yeah, so I'm actually very lucky because I've had both experiences. My first Ironman, I was in full control the entire race, and I did not once feel like I was going to blow, or like what they call implode. And that was a really great race, and it was a well executed race for me. So I never really went into like very dark places in that event. But then when I went to CONA, and I was actually on the island and I was training on the island, the Monday before the race, I actually hit a car on the Queen K highway, which is that's the main highway that the athletes cycle on. And what that meant then was that I wasn't able to run the whole of the week before the race. So in the race, I then got off the bike and I was actually in a really good position. I think I was then 9th in my age category. And my goal was to then run a 3 hour 20 minute marathon. I ran a 3 hour 14 marathon in South Africa. So the goal was realistic. But because I had not run the entire week before the race, my body basically what they call over tapered, which means that I rested my legs too much for the run. So by the time I got into the run, I had absolutely nothing in the tank. And my body just didn't want to cooperate. I didn't bike too hard, nothing. I was actually feeling good off the bike, but my body just didn't want to go. And that was by far the hardest day of my life. I've never had to go through anything as hard as that. It was my
or because mentally and physically,
like it was so bad mentally.
Did you get through it though? I'm not aware.
Yeah, so what actually happened then, and this is what I'm going to get at now, is I had to then like make decisions, you know, and I trained like for 6 months throughout winter, and there was a lot of sacrifice, and you know, so I started tapping into those kinds of things, you know, thinking of people back home, you know, thinking of the time away from, like, you know, spending time with Carla and my family and some of my friends because of my training, and my mind was literally just telling me, like, just pull out, like, you don't need to do this to yourself. And that for me was the hardest mental battle I've ever had to go through. And yeah, I had to make decisions within the race, and I actually then, you know, thought, okay, well, my goal of going under 10 hours is completely out the window, and I'm probably going to run well over 4 hours in this marathon. I was literally 3 kilometers into the marathon, which means that I had 39 kilometers to go. And it was my second ever marathon. My first ever marathon was Ironman South Africa, and I already had nothing in the tank. So I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. This is just like ridiculous. So I actually had to adopt a new strategy, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't make it any easier, but basically what I decided was that I was going to run between every single aid station, and I was going to walk the entire aid station. And I did that for the entire 39 kilometers left. I ran between every aid station, and then I walked. Every aid station, I took in my nutrition. I used my sponges, ice blocks, all of that kind of stuff, to keep my body's core temperature down. And then, yeah, I noticed that every aid station that I went through, I lost 1 second per kilometer. So if I went into the aid station at 5 minutes a K, I would come out the aid station at 5:01 minutes per kilometer. So if I could just keep running at that constant speed between the aid stations and lose that 1 second every aid station, I could still have a respectable run. So I ended up running a 3:41, and I did a 9-hour 39, I think. But it was, yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that I was still able to pull that off. But it doesn't change the fact that it was like by far the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. And I also didn't get what I was going there for. So, but that's life. And I mean, that happens, you know, and as an athlete, you're going to have disappointments. Like it's inevitable. And you need to learn to deal with those kinds of disappointments. But it was still something that I needed to process after the race.
But once going through something like that, where, okay, in this instance it was very physical, that battling first, doesn't it make you feel just that extra bit stronger if you have to go into something else, or not?
I think that it will. I mean, I'm a straight shooter, bro, and I speak open and honestly, and that was so deep and dark that it actually did damage, mentally. And I just couldn't imagine going back into that, you know. And it took a while actually to recover from that, to be honest. And I'm now starting to feel like my mind is getting a lot stronger again. I'm really able to push harder in training. You know, when the going gets tough, I'm able to push through and endure. Whereas the mental fatigue that I got after that race, it sat with me for at least 1.5 to 2 years. And I almost became, in a sense, a little bit afraid of that place again. And every week we tap into those places as athletes. We're going deep in training. And I mean, it's like I say, you've got to become comfortable with that place. And I became, that place for me in CONA was very uncomfortable. So I did struggle, yeah.